My husband was cheating on me with his childhood friend in a hotel room while I was suffering from depression. I couldn't take it anymore. 29F, never thought I'd be sharing something like this on Reddit, but I really need to get it off my chest. My husband Jake, 31M, and I have been married for 5 years now, and until recently, I thought we were happy. We met back in college during our senior year. I was an art major, always covered in paint and charcoal, while Jake was studying engineering. He was the kind of guy who could solve complex equations in his sleep. We met at a house party thrown by some mutual friends. I remember standing in the corner, nursing a cheap beer and feeling out of place among the crowd of soon-to-be graduates. That's when Jake walked up, flashed his crooked smile, and asked if I wanted to play beer pong. I'm terrible at it, but something about his easygoing nature made me say yes. We spent the rest of the night talking and laughing, and I knew there was something special about him. After that night, we started hanging out more. We'd study together in the library, Jake working on his engineering projects while I sketched in my notebook. We'd grab coffee between classes, and soon enough, we were inseparable. By the time graduation rolled around, we were officially a couple. After college, Jake landed a job at a big tech company in the city. I found work at a small graphic design firm. Not exactly my dream job, but it paid the bills. We dated for 3 years, building our careers and saving money. Then, on a cold fall day, Jake took me hiking to our favorite spot overlooking the city. As the sun was setting, he got down on one knee and proposed. It was the happiest moment of my life. We had a beautiful wedding the following autumn. Nothing too fancy, just our closest friends and family in a rustic barn venue. I'll never forget the look in Jake's eyes as I walked down the aisle, or how he whispered, "I love you," right before we said our vows. The first couple years of marriage were amazing. We traveled, adopted a shabby dog from the local shelter, and started talking about having kids. We both wanted a family, so after our second anniversary, we decided to start trying. At first, it was exciting. We'd joke about baby names and imagine what our kids would look like. But as the months went by with no positive pregnancy tests, that excitement turned to worry. After a year of trying with no luck, we decided to see a fertility specialist. Dr. Chen ran a bunch of tests on both of us. I remember sitting in her office, holding Jake's hand so tight my knuckles were white as we waited for the results. Jake's tests all came back normal, but they found that I have polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, which can make it harder to get pregnant. Dr. Chen put me on medication to help regulate my cycles and told us to keep trying. It's been almost a year since then, and still nothing. We've tried everything. Tracking my cycles religiously, using ovulation predictor kits, changing our diets, even trying acupuncture. I've cut out caffeine and alcohol, started doing yoga, and taken every supplement under the sun. Nothing seems to be working. I'm starting to feel like such a failure. It seems like everywhere I go, I see pregnant women or families with babies. Every time I log into Facebook, there's another pregnancy announcement or ultrasound picture. It's a constant reminder of what I can't seem to do, of how my body is letting me down. The stress is really starting to get to me. I'm irritable all the time, snapping at Jake over little things like leaving dishes in the sink or forgetting to buy milk. I can tell he's getting frustrated too, even though he tries to hide it. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with this sad, disappointed expression when he thinks I'm not paying attention. It breaks my heart because I know he wants a baby just as much as I do. A few weeks ago, I overheard Jake talking to his mom on the phone. He thought I was in the shower, but I just stepped out to grab a towel. I heard him say, "I don't know how much longer we can keep trying like this. It's tearing us apart." It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Is that really how he feels? Is our marriage falling apart because I can't give him a child? I've tried to talk to Jake about how I'm feeling, but it's hard. He always says the right things, that he loves me no matter what, that we're in this together. But I can't shake the feeling that he's disappointed in me. I see the way his face falls every time I tell him my period has started, or how he avoids talking about our friends' new babies. I've started to withdraw from our friends and family. It's too hard to be around people with kids or hear about their perfect lives. I've stopped going to baby showers and kids' birthday parties. I know it's not healthy, but I can't bear to paste on a fake. Smile and pretend everything's okay when inside I'm falling apart. Work has become a struggle too. I used to love my job, pouring my creativity into designs and illustrations. But lately, I can barely focus. I find myself staring at the computer screen, lost in thoughts about what I'm doing wrong or why my body won't cooperate. My boss has noticed my decline in productivity, and I'm terrified I might lose my job on top of everything else. Last night, things took an even weirder turn. Jake and I were watching a movie while he made dinner. His phone was on the coffee table, and it lit up with a new message. I glanced over and saw it was from someone named Natasha. The preview showed a bunch of heart and kiss emojis. I was confused. Jake had never mentioned anyone named Natasha before. When I opened the message, there was no chat history, just that one text with the emojis. My heart started racing. Who was this woman sending flirty messages to my husband? When Jake came back from the kitchen, I asked him about it, trying to keep my voice casual even though my insides were churning. He seemed taken aback at first, but then said, "Oh, Natasha? She's just an old friend from high school. I ran into her the other day on my way home from work." I pressed him about the hearts and kisses, and he said, "I helped her out with a work project last week. She was probably just saying thanks." He assured me there was nothing going on and that I shouldn't worry. But something about the whole thing feels off. Why would an old friend he just reconnected with be sending flirty emojis? And why delete the chat history? I want to trust Jake. I really do. He's never given me a reason not to before. But with everything going on with our fertility struggles, I can't help but feel insecure. Is he looking for someone else? Someone who can give him the family he wants? Am I being paranoid? Or is there something to my suspicions? I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to confront Jake, to demand to see his phone and get the whole truth. But another part of me is terrified of what I might find. What if there really is something going on? What if our marriage is falling apart and I've been too caught up in our fertility issues to notice? I feel like I'm losing everything. My dream of becoming a mother, my confidence, my career, and now maybe even my marriage. I'm scared and confused and don't know where to turn. My friends don't understand. They all have kids or are pregnant, and they just tell me to relax and it will happen when it's meant to. My family means well, but they live across the country and don't really get what I'm going through. I guess that's why I'm turning to Reddit. I need some outside perspective. Am I overreacting about this Natasha person? Should I be worried? How do I bring this up with Jake without sounding like a crazy paranoid wife? And how do I keep my marriage together when it feels like it's crumbling under the weight of our infertility? Any advice would be appreciated. I feel so alone right now, and I'm scared of what the future holds. Thanks for reading this far, if you made it. It feels good just to get it all out, even if it's just to strangers on the internet. Update. It's been almost 2 months since my last post, and I wish I had better news to share. Things have only gotten worse, and I'm at my breaking point. Jake's behavior has changed drastically. He's become distant and cold, barely engaging in conversation beyond basic pleasantries. Our once lively dinner discussions have turned into silent, uncomfortable meals. He spends more time at work, often coming home late with vague excuses about project deadlines. The fertility treatments we were so hopeful about? Jake's enthusiasm has vanished. He's missed the last 2 appointments with Dr. Chen, claiming he couldn't get away from work. When I try to discuss our options or next steps, he changes the subject, or suddenly remembers an urgent email he needs to send. Our sex life, once passionate and loving, now feels mechanical and forced. It's clear he's just going through the motions, probably out of some sense of duty to keep trying for a baby. But the spark, the intimacy we once shared, it's gone. I've noticed other changes too. He's more protective of his phone, always keeping it face down or in his pocket. He takes calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. When I walk in, he quickly ends the conversation. The stress and anxiety have taken their toll on me. I couldn't focus at work, making careless mistakes and missing deadlines. My boss was understanding at first, but after a series of stern warnings, I decided to quit before I could be fired. I thought Jake would be concerned, but he barely reacted when I told him. He just nodded and said, "If that's what you think is best." Now I'm home all day, alone with my thoughts and fears. I've tried to fill my time with hobbies, but nothing holds my interest. I've started sleeping more, sometimes not getting out of bed until the afternoon. Jake doesn't seem to notice or care. About a week ago, I decided I needed answers. When Jake left for work, I started following him. I know it sounds crazy and invasive, but I was desperate to understand what was happening to my marriage. The first few days, I lost him in traffic or he went straight to his office. But yesterday, everything changed. I watched him leave work early, something he claimed he could never do. He drove to a part of town I didn't recognize and parked outside a hotel. My heart was pounding as I watched him check in and go up to a room. I waited in my car, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a work event or a surprise for me, even though our anniversary was months away. Then I saw her. A tall blonde woman I'd never seen before walked into the hotel and went straight to the elevator. She was gorgeous, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks by. I knew in my gut this was Natasha. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I marched into the hotel and up to the room I'd seen Jake enter. I knocked, no, pounded on the door. I heard Jake's voice, angry and annoyed, yell, "Just a minute." A few seconds later, he opened the door, wearing nothing but a towel. His hair was wet, his chest still glistening with water droplets. The look on his face when he saw me, I'll never forget it. Shock, guilt, and then anger flashed across his features. Behind him, I could see rumpled sheets on the bed and a woman's purse on the nightstand. I lost it. I started yelling, calling him every name I could think of. I demanded to know how long this had been going on, if she was the reason he'd given up on us. Jake tried to quiet me, to pull me into the room, but I was beyond reason. The woman, Natasha, I assumed, peeked out from the bathroom, wrapped in a sheet. She looked terrified and quickly ducked back inside. By this point, other hotel guests had come out to see what the commotion was about. I was crying and screaming, telling everyone who would listen that my husband was a cheating bastard. Jake kept trying to calm me down, to get me to leave, but I was beyond his control. Eventually, hotel security came. They asked us to leave, but I refused to go anywhere with Jake. I told them he was cheating on me, that the woman in his room wasn't his wife. The security guard looked uncomfortable, but said it wasn't his business to intervene in domestic disputes. Jake finally got dressed, and Natasha slipped out while he was trying to talk to me. I saw her rush to the elevator, her face red with shame. Good, I thought. She should be ashamed. In the end, I left Jake at the hotel. I told him not to come home, that I'd have his things packed and left with his parents. The last thing I said to him was that I'd see him in court. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying everything I'd seen and heard. How could he do this to me? After everything we'd been through, how could he throw it all away for some blonde bimbo? I'm writing this from my sister's guest room. I couldn't bear to be in our house, surrounded by memories of what I thought was a happy marriage. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Part of me wants to try to work things out. 5 years of marriage has to count for something, right? But a bigger part knows I could never trust him again. I guess I'm back to square one, asking Reddit for advice. How do I even begin to pick up the pieces of my life? Has anyone been through something similar? How did you cope? Thank you for listening. I never thought I'd be that woman, the one with the cheating husband. But here I am. Any words of wisdom would be appreciated. Update. It's been 6 months since that awful day at the hotel, and I'm finally ready to share an update. These past months have been the hardest of my life, but I'm slowly starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. After I caught Jake cheating, I stayed with my sister for a few weeks. I was a mess, barely eating, crying constantly, and unable to sleep without nightmares. My sister was amazing, taking care of me and helping me navigate the initial shock and pain. When I felt strong enough, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I reached out to both our families and close friends to explain what had happened. Their reactions were mixed, to say the least. Jake's family, especially his mother, were surprisingly cruel. My mother-in-law had the audacity to blame me for Jake's infidelity. She said, and I quote, "If you had been able to give him a child, he wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." She went on about how a barren woman couldn't give a man the happiness of a family. Her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought were starting to heal. My own family rallied around me. My parents were furious with Jake and his family. They argued that my fertility struggles were no excuse for cheating. My dad wanted to drive across 3 states to have a word with Jake, but I managed to talk him out of it. My siblings were supportive too, offering places to stay and shoulders to cry on. Our friends were split. Some, mostly couples with kids, seemed to sympathize with Jake. They didn't outright condone his actions, but they made comments about how hard it must have been for him, dealing with the stress of infertility. Others were firmly on my side, disgusted by Jake's betrayal. Through all of this, Jake tried to apologize. He sent flowers, called constantly, and even showed up at my sister's place begging for another chance. He swore it was a one-time mistake, that Natasha meant nothing to him. But I couldn't believe him. The trust was shattered, and no amount of roses or teary apologies could fix it. I filed for divorce about a month after the hotel incident. Jake contested it at first, still insisting we could work things out. But eventually, he agreed to an uncontested divorce. We divided our assets, sold our house, and went our separate ways. The day I signed those final papers was both heartbreaking and liberating. The divorce process brought up all the pain and anger I'd been trying to suppress. I fell into a deep depression. Some days, I couldn't even get out of bed. The future I'd imagined, kids growing old with Jake, was gone, and I felt lost without it. I started seeing a therapist, which has been incredibly helpful. She's helping me work through my feelings of inadequacy and failure. I'm learning that my worth isn't tied to my ability to have children or to keep a man faithful. It's a slow process, but I'm getting there. One of the hardest parts has been learning to be alone. Jake and I had been together since college, and suddenly I was on my own for the first time in my adult life. Simple things like cooking for one or sleeping in an empty bed felt strange and lonely. But gradually, I'm finding my footing. I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I joined a support group for women dealing with infertility and divorce, and it's been comforting to talk to people who truly understand what I'm going through. We meet weekly, and those meetings have become a lifeline for me. As for work, I've started freelancing as a graphic designer. It's not steady yet, but it's giving me a sense of purpose and independence. I'm even thinking about going back to school to learn new skills and maybe change careers entirely. I've also started focusing on my health, both physical and mental. I've taken up yoga and running, which help clear my mind and make me feel stronger. I'm eating better and have even lost a bit of weight. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm taking care of myself for me, not for the possibility of getting pregnant. There are still hard days, of course. Days when I see happy families in the park and feel that familiar ache. Days when I miss the comfort and familiarity of my life with Jake. But those days are becoming fewer and farther between. I ran into Natasha at the grocery store last week. It was awkward and painful, but I managed to hold my head high. She tried to apologize, saying she didn't know Jake was married. I didn't want to hear it, but in a way, the encounter gave me closure. I realized I don't hate her anymore. My anger is reserved for Jake and the choices he made. As for Jake, I heard through mutual friends that he's moved to another state for work. Part of me is relieved. It's easier to move on without the possibility of running into him. Another part feels a twinge of sadness, marking the final end of our shared life. So here I am, 6 months later. Single, starting a new career, and slowly learning to love myself again. It's not the life I imagined, but I'm beginning to see possibilities I never considered before. Maybe I'll adopt or foster kids someday. Maybe I'll travel the world. Maybe I'll fall in love again. Or maybe I'll discover that I'm happiest on my own. For the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to the future instead of dreading it. To anyone going through something similar, hang in there. It gets better, it gets easier, and you're stronger than you know. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your kind words and advice have meant more than you can imagine.